Your materials for charcoal are fine charcoal, compressed charcoal, charcoal pencils for finishing touches. So the orange pencils you'll typically see if you read the bottom of them just like a pencil, regular graphite pencil, it'll give you different gradients. So I've got a 4B soft, 2B medium, and HB is hard. So I've got 3 different kinds of charcoal pencils, and I've got 2 other kinds actually. A Peel and Sketch and a Derwent Charcoal Light. This is definitely a charcoal pencil. When you put it down, it smudges easier. Those are for finishing. So you're going to pile a bunch of boxes on top of each other. You don't have to do 3. If you just have 2, that's fine. If you just have 1, that's okay too. What you're going to do is take your vine charcoal first, and you're going to lay out the overall shape of everything. So just imagine that you're forgetting about what's the information of the boxes on the inside. You're just going to create that shape for the boundary of all the boxes. Okay, just like a little teeny tiny ant is crawling all the way across the borders. I'm just going to put the same gray all the way down for that whole shape. Take the vine charcoal and use the side of it to create a line. And then a shade going down. So I don't need to take the tip of the charcoal like this and draw at the tip. I can just drag it with me. If I'm wondering about a certain angle that I see, I want to use my sighting techniques. I remember I taught you the sighting techniques when we were doing still lifes, where you line up, we were doing it with a pencil at that point, you line your drawing implement up with whatever angle you're trying to figure out. I want to know what that angle is. So if I close one eye, I extend my hand out, my arm out, and I line my pencil up in space, the bottom of that box. And then I just pretend my arm can't move anymore, and I'm frozen in place, and I bring my pencil over to my paper like this. That'll inform me of the correct angle. I can just sort of trace my pencil. Again, right now I'm just focusing on the general outline of all the boxes as one big box blob. And then I'm filling it in. Because these aren't white boxes. You can also blend with paper towel if you don't feel like using your hand for the whole thing. Got an overall gray value for my box blob, which is basically if I were to just take a pair of scissors and cut out the border of all of those boxes and take that shape out, that's what this is. Now I'm going to go back in. I've just used vine charcoal. I'm going to go back in with vine charcoal and think about the spots that are the medium of the values. So not the lightest value, the next one up. So that would be printer stick. That would be here and here, here, inside the box there, on this side of the box, wherever I see that next value. I'm pretending as if this is a black and white image. I'm gonna work on the inside of this box at the top right here. Start to see these boxes not as boxes, but shapes of dark and light. So I'm working on the top box, and now I'm working on the very bottom left edge, left corner. So my view and the camera view are different right now, just a little bit. But I've created, this is one side of the box here. This is one side of the box. This is the inside of the box. This is going to be where it folds out. And then this is the inside wall. I see more of it at my angle than where the camera is. And then this is where the flap is on this side. So there's a flap here, there's a flap here, and there's a flap up here. I can make angles more understandable when I start drawing shadow. So I really want to, I'm making this flap here, but if I draw this shadow, I've essentially drawn the side of that flap. I can see this cardboard edge right here. I can see that very edge is dark. I want to keep that in mind as I draw. The shadow ends there, and there's that edge. I do see it. And there's the flap. That's the flap here. Okay. I'm just going to keep on laying out where I see. I'm going to go back in with the compressed charcoal in the darkest areas so I can lay down the vine charcoal right now wherever I want it to go. It's good to map out with the vine charcoal. It's the type of charcoal that is the softest and essentially the weakest, so it's not going to create a very permanent area that I can't lighten up. If you want to check the angle of something, because I wanted to check the angle of this shadow to see if it's right, and I don't think it is. Align my charcoal up with the shadow line, hold my arm in place, try not to move the angle at all, put it down on the paper, and the angle is just a little bit off, should go down more. I'm working on the bottom box. When you're doing boxes, make sure that this line here and that line there are the same, essentially the same angle. Don't make it this, so this and this are the same angle. Think about where things intersect in space. So I'm wondering about where this line is back here on the inside of that flap. And the line goes across like this and it intersects this flap on a certain point. So I know it's about right there. So I'm just going to put a little marker dot right there where I need that to go. I'm mapping it out. Don't think too much about it, just go with it. Charcoal is something to get used to for sure, and drawing boxes is also not the easiest thing, but don't think of it as hard. Think of it as just something that you're observing. I feel like that angle's off. Take my hard eraser and erase again, so that's better. If you know an area is lighter than how you've shaded it, you can always just kind of touch it away with your hand like this, or you can take your needle eraser and kind of tap it. So I'm just figuring out in space where grays connect, where shapes connect. So I know that there's a shadow in the box way back there, and I'm trying to figure out where on this flap it intersects, which is about right there. So if I put a little mark for myself on the paper, I will know that's where I need to go. Keep looking at the boxes, looking back to your drawing, back to the boxes, back to your drawing. Focus on one area. Really isolate that little segment of whatever's happening and try your best to recreate the shades of gray that are happening in that area. That's how you don't get too overwhelmed by it. I'm going to go in with the compressed charcoal now because that's going to always be darker than the vine charcoal. So I've kind of laid it out roughly with the vine charcoal. Even in the darkest areas, I added vine charcoal. But now I'm going to go back in with a little piece of compressed charcoal, which definitely does not get eaten up as fast. And I'm going to focus on the darkest areas of where I'm looking, which would be inside here, inside that box. And I think those are the only two really dark areas. I'm going to use the very edge of my charcoal stick as my sharp pencil point, really. Essentially, if I put that edge onto the paper where I know I need it to be super dark from this side of the flap to the right, I can draw a nice crisp line going up. If that kind of dulls, I'll just flip the charcoal around. Really bumps up the contrast as soon as you put that first area of compressed charcoal in. I'm really focusing on that one darkest little pocket right now and trying to keep it clean and crisp by using the edges of my compressed charcoal. Now, if I don't press super hard, I pressed really hard here with the compressed charcoal, and I pressed like almost as hard here. And I want to make this dark with the compressed charcoal, but not as dark as this. So in order to do that, I'm not pressing hard. I just sort of fill it in lightly like this, light pressure, and then I can smudge it. And then it creates that darkness level, that shade. Okay. Start with your darkest with the compressed charcoal and then go back from there. Go lighter from there. So that was the next. This was the darkest. This was not as dark. And then this is darker than here. So I'm going to press a little lighter here, smudge it, see what it looks like, kind of fade it away, because on this side of the shadow, it goes from darker and then it gets lighter. Start to see the changes in shadow as well. And you'll start seeing that as soon as you've spent at least 20 minutes focusing on the pile of boxes, the box blob. So I'm going from here up to this side, and I look back and forth between them. So I'm from this shadow, I'm going up there. And I know that that's darker right there than it is right there. So when I lay down the compressed charcoal up here, I'm going to need to make this a little lighter than here. And I can do that by giving it a gray value first and then kind of touching away with my clean hand, kind of picking up that charcoal so it becomes lighter for me. And if I did too much, I can always just lay it down again. I'm going to create kind of a crisp edge again. You can crisp things up and work on edges with the charcoal pencil. Right now, with the compressed charcoal, you're bumping up the darks and the medium darks now. With the vine charcoal, you are working on the lightest areas and the light medium values, kind of like the beginning of the spectrum. I can always just take my charcoal hand, my charcoal fingers, and rub in a new spot, and it'll even make it darker sometimes. Just gonna bump up the darkness level over here. I don't think that's dark enough anymore. Let me go here, because that needs to bump up. I don't think, it's definitely not as dark as that. And so this needs to be just a little bit darker. I see a shadow over here. Don't ignore the shadow. So I gotta put, ooh, hello, hello. I'm gonna put that shadow in on this flap. Shadows will help you out because I need this to look really light right here. So if I put the shadow over there, that'll make that pop out. I feel like I went a little too dark right here. So what you can do with your kneadable eraser is your magical charcoal sponge. Just press down and pick up some of that charcoal and make it lighter. And then you just go like this and it should eat it right up. There's like a mini shadow over here, and that's why this looks lighter than right here. But these two look similar to each other. Is that right here is like another darker shadow in there. A shadow of a shadow right in here. So I'm gonna go around, probably go back with the vine charcoal now and go to where my lightest areas are on my boxes and really take a look at the difference in value between parts of the box. Like, is this flap darker than that side? And if so, I need to bump up the value here just a little bit. Is this lighter than the one back there? I need to compare things. This is super bright because that's where the light is shining. So that is going to be lighter than this. So I'm going back with the vine charcoal and doing some tweaking. And I'll be able to start putting shadows in as well that exist. So I'm making this flap just a little bit darker than this side. And I want to make sure that I use the side of my vine charcoal and kind of push and drag it along that flap edge so I create a crisp line. And as I'm doing this, I realize certain things are off. Like this needs to come out a little bit more. This flap at the back. It's all about where lines in space intersect. And as you're drawing one thing and you're adjusting another, that other previous thing might need to be adjusted as well. Gotta crisp up that edge of the box by making it darker on that side, because it is darker. Gonna continue to compare sides and flaps. This is lighter than this one. So this one I'm gonna go back and go over lightly with the vine charcoal, la 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 la, like so, and then smooth it out. And then in here, this is darker than that. This is darker than that. So by a smidge. So if I make this the inside of the box there, this darker than that, slightly. And I see that I see like a darker line back there for the flap. You can kind of fuzz out and fade. You need to make sure that this is still at the correct darkness level. I feel like this needs to just get a little bit darker. So I'm going to take my compressed charcoal. It's coming along here, coming along. Continuing on with checking areas for light and dark level. I need to touch, this actually needs to be a light spot. So I'm gonna take the hard eraser and just really erase that out, because that needs to be the lightest area. I think things were off, so that kind of need to fix that. So I'll just make this just a little bit darker over here. Then make a little shadow happen. It's like a jigsaw puzzle, a very strange jigsaw puzzle. And back at the shadows on the far flap here. Working over there right now. Checking things out at the top of the box up here. Maybe I need to make that wider up there. I think this, I kind of lost some definition in here. So I'm going to like this become kind of a muddy mess. I know it's darker underneath here, and that's a little lighter. So I'm going to bump up contrast underneath that box. It's almost as if you have like a couple different dials that you are turning to kind of adjust the volume of your dark and your lights. It's like, oh, it's too quiet over here, so I'm gonna make it louder. Oh, this is too loud, I want to take it down a notch. Step back and take a look at your drawing from time to time to see how you're doing. Sometimes you just need to take a little break, a little step away to see things differently. I don't know if you guys have eraser pens. I don't know where mine is right now, but those are super handy to get fine eraser lines. And I know that since the light is coming from this direction, that the top of this lip, the top of the flap back there is like glowing. So that's right here. So if I had an eraser pen, I would use that, but I'm just going to use the hard eraser and just draw a highlight right there, because it's lit up. It's like that corner of the box has a little glow. It's got a little glow to it. There's a little glow in here. There's a little edge glow right up here. When you have finally mapped out everything for yourself, you went in with the compressed charcoal, you went back in with the vine charcoal, and you bumped up the middle grays. So you went from the darkest to the almost darkest to the medium darkest to the almost lightest to the lightest, right? That spectrum. Then you take your charcoal pencils and you go back in and you make things look crisp. So I can go back in with my 2B. And I can make this edge a little bit nicer. I can use a ruler too. I really wanted to make things look super nice, but I'm not going to right now. As you can see, things are very messy, so you might just want to take a little break and wash your hands. Clean hands. Okay. Time to make these boxes look crisp. Because as you'll see, there's little darker lines in the box, like little baby shadows in there that you really can't show until you take out a pencil. This is a 2B. I might go to 4B. 4B is going to be a little darker for me. That's not soft enough. Try something else. Yep, this is it. This is my peel, my charcoal peeler. This is a softer charcoal pencil. This is a light Derwent charcoal, so I can actually, it's almost like somewhere in between a Vine charcoal pencil and the compressed charcoal. And if I see an area that kind of fades for me from like darkness level, like in between, I can't really get with either a Vine charcoal or compressed charcoal, I can do it with grades of charcoal pencil. There are little folds inside of boxes because that's how boxes are made. So if you see a line and a little shadow, top of that line, make it happen. Just refining this edge of the flat because it, no matter how hard you try, sometimes with the Vine charcoal you can't create a very crisp line. So I'm just going to go back in at the edges of this flap and just crisp it up. Make it look like it's really popping out. It's going to require me just having to move my hand in different spots, or I can put paper down, rest paper on top of my drawing so I don't smudge it away anything. Go back in with your compressed charcoal. If you've put down a nice line with your charcoal pencil, you can kind of fill it in now if there's a gap in value. It's like you're hyper focusing now on focusing, I guess. Everything was kind of blurry because you're blocking things out on the boxes, blocking out those values into gray blobs. But now you're back in there and you're like, all right, I see this little detail right here. I'm going to get in there with my pencil. I'm going to sharpen it up. Often a little shadow that exists underneath a box. Just a little strip of shadow before the other shadow. I'm going to make this that darkest area that I put in at the beginning. I'm going to crisp that up. I can use a ruler. Ooh. This line, the angle of this line needs to be the same as this one. Okay, that's basically it. So start first by laying out with the vine charcoal the general blob of all of the boxes. That'll be your lightest value. Minus, I mean, I can go back in and decide if I want this to be brighter. Need a little eraser. Can kind of really take out more if I want. Okay, or the pencil eraser if you have one. After I do that, then I put in with the vine charcoal what I think are the almost darkest areas. Press really hard, the vine charcoal. Then I go with the compressed charcoal in the spots that are definitely the darkest. And then I take the vine charcoal and go to the spots that are the almost darkest and the almost darkest, and I bump up those values. And eventually, after much tweaking and dialing this way and that, you'll eventually get to a happy place. I didn't really finish it at certain edges, like over here or over here. And if you don't do that, and that's fine too, as long as you've really focused and worked on certain parts really well and finished those. You don't have to worry about finishing everything perfectly.